Going through okay?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. I am Smriti Safaya. I'm a second-year distance PhD student with the University of York in the Education Department and the Stockholm Environment Institute in the Environment and Geography Department. Today, I will share my experience with recruiting schools and interviewing participants amid school closures due to COVID restrictions and a sensitive political climate here in Hong Kong. My research journey has definitely felt like a lopsided love story, and like most tales of the heart, the path is rather bumpy and unpredictable, but inevitably enlightening. But first, I'd like to show you something that probably many of you have seen for yourselves as well. Oh, it might, the video might be loading a little funny. Let's see if it might work.
Safaya, are we supposed to hear anything in the video?
No, there's no sound. It's just the,
okay.
it's just the, yeah.
Great.
I don't know if it came through clearly because it suddenly said that my internet was unstable. Apologies, but that's okay. I think most of the people probably got an idea about what that's about, but we're going to break down the video anyway. So take one, that's me, and that's a potential school that I'm trying to chase to be part of my study. And take two, yet again, that's me and another potential school. So you can see the direction that they went, and that's my sad face of rejection. So this happened a lot during my pilot phase and my main phase of data collection. So all that was really left for me to do was to look straight ahead, fluff up my feathers, and do my dance, searching for opportunities with schools over and over and over again. At the start of my first year in October 2019, all I kept thinking about was the N. My initially positive mindset was coming from my background as a geologist, and I was told that the bigger the N, the better my research, very positivist mindset. But within 6 months, I had to shift my perspective to recognize that the reality on the ground was very different. I'm based in Hong Kong, and by April 2020, we had already experienced a full 12 months of disruptions from mass protests, socio-political clampdowns, and 2 waves of COVID-19. So schools were forced to shift to online or blended learning 3 times in that period. And it was also the time when I was starting to reach out to schools to ask them to participate in my research. So you can imagine how excited the schools were to hear from me at that time. My list of potential schools included those that I had either worked in previously as a high school teacher or had contacts in, as well as those outside of my experience, because I wanted to include as diverse a range of schools as possible. But I realized I needed to be very strategic with approaching schools because these were no ordinary times. Rather than focusing on the N, I needed to build on the T, trust. At a time when there was tremendous skepticism and distrust of institutions and individuals, if I couldn't develop this with my participating schools, I would have nothing to research. So building trust looked different at different schools, and I needed to be mindful of 3 things. The first was culture, who I spoke to at the school first. Local culture highly respects seniority, so when approaching local schools, I always spoke with the principals first, before connecting to any interested teachers. My approach with international schools was exactly the opposite. I first targeted the subject teachers in geography and science as it relates to my research topic before seeking permission from their leadership. It was about recognizing the top-down versus the bottom-up cultures across local and international schools. The second is language. It's a sensitive issue given the current political climate. In the past 7 months, a handful of local school teachers had their licenses revoked for life on questionable charges. Just a few weeks ago, a professional teachers union survey revealed that 40% of local school teachers were considering quitting the profession. And with the newly installed national security law stating colluding with foreign forces as an offense, local schools were understandably concerned with working with someone who isn't Chinese. But I'm no outsider. Ngo hai Hongkongan. I'm a Hong Konger because my family has lived in Hong Kong for almost 30 years, and it's the home I know best. But still, I wanted to be very conscious and sensitive to their needs, and I adjusted some potentially triggering words in my communications to gain their trust. So have a look at my research topic. Imagine you were in my shoes. What words would you choose to edit, keeping in mind the political atmosphere that has clamped down on mass protests, democracy, and freedom of speech? Perhaps I was being overly cautious, but I reworked these terms and ideas just to be on the safe side. Activism, citizen, and catalyst. Interestingly, I did not need to do this for international schools because they are held to slightly different standards and are in fact attractive to terms that highlight student voice and agency. This also extended to the opt-in versus opt-out decisions about consent forms from participants. I sacrificed getting a higher N by accepting that local schools felt more comfortable with an opt-in approach, which required a little more work, and therefore I had fewer participants join. But at least I would have some representation from that demographic in my study. The third is workload. At a time of great stress from school closures, I recognize that participating in my research would likely be the last thing possible to lift that burden and shift that mindset from this is going to be too much work to this shows innovative pedagogy in action. Citizen science is the public participation in scientific research, and its use in schools as a teaching tool is uncommon, especially in Asia, and studying its impact on students even rarer. So this was my hook. Schools are always looking for opportunities to apply cutting-edge pedagogies, but I needed to make that introduction to citizen science as painless as possible. I was looking for schools to commit their students involved in citizen science experiences to complete pre and post surveys and participate in focus groups, and to commit their teachers to participate in interviews. I knew it would be a big ask. So what did this look like? What I'm sharing in this series of 4 snippets are a variety of communications between me and school leadership and teachers over the course of many, many months. There's no need to dig into the details of these snippets, but I wanted to give you a sense of what they look like, with embedded links for accessible, useful, concise resources, school-specific curriculum language, step-by-step instructions for teachers, as well as for students. I created these summaries by doing school-specific research, searching the subject interests of potential teachers. I wasn't stalking, but I was digging, and researching likely curricular links to streamline the experience of joining my research while meeting their learning objectives at the same time. I was trying to create a win-win situation. So now that I was getting some local and international schools keen to participate in my study, the next stage was developing trust with the participants. And I kept the same 3 aspects in mind: culture, language, and workload. I also realized that if participating with my participants was going to happen mostly online, a topic fellow York PhD student Yanina Sepers will discuss this afternoon, choosing the right platform is key. I needed to find technology flexible enough for handling speaking with individuals in small groups, using verbal and written communication, allowing real-time communication in English and Chinese and allowing for translations, and creating various exercises for drawing, sorting, ranking, and brainstorming to replace a lot of that original face-to-face interactive activity. So between Zoom and Google Slides, I found shifting to online focus groups and interviews was actually ideal. So Zoom was my audio and visual platform of choice because of their security features, participant familiarity, and functionality. The chat tool was extremely vital when I was conducting focus groups and interviews with those who weren't as comfortable speaking, had hearing impairments, or were joining from noisy locations. It also proved immensely useful for sharing translations of questions and responses in English and Chinese in real time to aid communication. With testing in my pilot phase, I found that Google Slides could meet all of my interactive requirements for mimicking face-to-face activities, some examples of which I will show next. So at the start of the focus groups and interviews on Zoom, I shared the link to the interactive space on Google Slides via the chat. Here are some examples of the slides where I set up questions with spaces for drawing, brainstorming, sorting, and ranking exercises. All participants had editing rights, so they could share their thoughts directly on the document, but I removed their editing rights immediately after the focus groups and interviews to preserve their ideas and avoid any accidental loss of information. So has this been a lot of work? Oh, yes. But I believe my results and research will be that much better for it. Although I'm still collecting more data until July this year, so far I have 36 students and 16 teachers participate in focus groups and interviews. And from the quantitative side of my mixed method study, I have pre and post survey paired data from 174 students. By focusing on building trust, my end actually turned out to be just fine. But will I always be successful? No. 1 year ago, I got my first yes from a school that wanted to participate in my research. And just 2 weeks ago, that same school said, sorry, now we can't because there's no more field trips because of COVID. And just this morning, I received an email which basically sets out that I think I've lost yet another school that I have spent 10 months chasing. So like we were saying before, you know, we celebrate when things go well, but we also recognize and share when things don't go so well. So my message to myself in the face of rejection is to look ahead, fluff up my feathers, do my dance again and again and again. I should strive to be a male pigeon. Thank you, Ngoisai. Happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. Smriti, and I apologize for calling you Safaya. I hope that was
okay.
fine. Yeah. So